For the sake of the sect, I bound myself in the Forbidden Land for 500 years. But now that I've returned, everything has changed. My master despises me. My senior sisters loathe me. The new junior brother has taken everything I once had. But I saw through an illusion. The events that will happen 10,000 years later. Thus, I wrote an abandonment letter and renounced the sect, transformed into a wandering cultivator to seek the great Tao. Just as I was making great strides on the heavenly path, my former master and senior sisters cried and begged me to return to the sect. To this, my response was only one sentence. Your dear junior brother has long died 500 years ago. You chose this yourselves. At this moment, a majestic hall in the western desert suddenly shook violently. Then a soul-stirring voice rang out. The three bodies have appeared in the eastern desolation. Karma has entangled that person. Dharma incarnation. Go retrieve the supreme treasure. As the voice fell, a Buddha statue that had been sitting cross-legged with drooping brows and closed eyes slowly opened its eyes. Then it directly stepped down from the lotus platform and walked out of the hall step by step, heading towards the east. Buddha's light shone all over his body. Everyone he encountered knelt to the ground. The Venerable One has emerged. 2 subdued demons. 2 vanquished devils. But Guan Zulin knew nothing of the disturbance in the western desert. She would never have imagined that a Buddhist statue was heading towards her from the west. At this moment, Guan Zulin was with her beloved little disciple, just having returned to Qingshuan Holy Land, empty-handed this time, made her face extremely grim, especially seeing her beloved disciple looking so dejected. Her mood became even more irritable. But despite her irritation, Guan Zulin still spoke words of comfort. Zhang Dao, do not be discouraged. Your second senior sister has already begun forging a new weapon for you. This time using even more heavenly materials and treasures. I believe it will be completed soon, and will surely surpass the Longian sword. Thank you for your care, master. Zhang Zun quickly bowed, coming back to his senses. But his face still showed some depression. It's just what? I'm just worried about the next time there might be thunder. Don't worry, this time I will set up a great formation to protect you personally. If that thunder dares to come again, watch as I shatter the thunderclouds. With the words of his Mahayana master, Zhang Zun finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking about his previous loss of composure, he quickly expressed his gratitude and then volunteered. I've heard that recently the sect is in serious shortage of low-level talismans. Even the 5th senior sister has been continuously making talismans for days. I plan to go to Moshifeng during this time to assist the 5th senior sister to alleviate the urgent needs of Qingshuan Holy Land. I hope Master will allow it. I hope Master will allow it. Your priority should be to continue your cultivation. Guan Zulin hesitated slightly. Master, cultivation can be done at any time, but compared to my modest improvement, the sect is far more important. These words were spoken with genuine sincerity. Guan Zulin listened with a smile. Very well. Just as you have reached the peak of foundation establishment, the next breakthrough doesn't require arduous cultivation. Maybe going to Moshifeng will help you break through quickly. You also have extraordinary talent in talisman making. With your help, I can be at ease. Thank you for granting permission, Master. I will not fail. Good, go ahead, soon. Zhang Zun rode his flying sword and left, watching his figure. Guan Zulin couldn't help but nod. Her little disciple not only had unmatched talent, his skills were solid in all 6 techniques. Most importantly, he was kind-hearted and obedient. In a flash of thought, Guan Zulin remembered the silent and reserved Gu Zhu, who even used the abandonment letter to threaten her. Immediately, she felt that it was a good thing for such a useless person like Gu Zhu to leave. It saved her from being annoyed. Just as she was thinking this, Guan Zulin suddenly frowned. In a flash, she moved to a dark and eerie valley This was the 10,000 Puppets Valley of Qingchuan Holy Land, and the residence of her sixth disciple, He Mengyan, a disciple who gave Guan Zulin constant headaches. He Mengyan had been silent and reserved since childhood. She didn't like to talk. She preferred to be close to various puppets. In recent years, she rarely went out. Even as her master, Guan Zulin could only see her occasionally. Guan Zulin had long been used to this. But this past year, her sixth disciple suddenly developed some bad tendencies. He Mengyan was probably making a puppet earlier. But suddenly, her soul rapidly left her body and rushed towards the soul fragment stone, which is used to erase a puppet's soul. If she really hit it, it wouldn't just be a serious injury, but soul annihilation. Rebellious disciple, stop! Guan Zulin hurriedly intervened, using her Mahayana supreme power to immediately block He Mengyan. But unexpectedly, He Mengyan seemed determined this time, even with her soul blocked by Guan Zulin. She continued to struggle desperately. Her soul suddenly looked at Guan Zulin with intense resentment. Let go of me, Guan Zulin! You vile woman! You deserve to die! No! We all deserve to die! We all deserve to die! He Mengyan's words were filled with immense resentment. She seemed like a vengeful spirit escaping from hell, looking at Guan Zulin with no trace of the usual respect and politeness. Instead, there was overwhelming resentment and killing intent. Even as a Mahayana supreme, Guan Zulin, faced with this gaze, even felt her scalp tingle a bit. But soon, Guan Zulin shook off these distracting thoughts and shouted angrily, "Rebellious disciple, wake up!" This angry shout made the previously resentful He Mengyan soul freeze in place. The next second, the struggling soul quickly retreated back into her body. Guan Zulin didn't dare delay. She picked up a soul-calming talisman and stuck it on He Mengyan. The next second, He Mengyan opened her eyes in a daze. She looked startled, as if seeing Guan Zulin for the first time. Immediately got up. Master, disciple was just distracted. Didn't know you were here. I didn't greet you properly. Please forgive me, master. At this moment, He Mengyan was timidly lowering her head, looking at her toes, completely like a timid child afraid of being scolded by elders. Totally different from the terrifying look of her soul earlier. Seeing her like this, Guan Zulin couldn't help but sigh. Master, He Mengyan said strangely, then seemed to remember something, suddenly widened her eyes, and asked in horror, did I just you went into a demonic state again? Guan Zulin nodded, her brows tightly furrowed. He Mengyan had previously entered a demonic state. She was a genius at the art of puppetry. The puppets she forged were extremely powerful. They once filled the gap of manpower in the sect. But such a talented disciple suddenly went into a demonic state a year ago. At that time, she seemed to be trying out the soul puppet technique, and her soul was suddenly damaged. Then she ran to the sect's entrance, cursing that the sect was full of ungrateful people, and cursing that Qingchuan Holy Land was full of vile people, that they would all die terrible deaths, that none of them would end well. She even cursed every master and disciple in the sect. First, she cursed Master Guan Zulin, accusing her of being an extremely vicious and utterly rotten wicked woman. Then she cursed the eldest senior sister as a cowardly and evasive useless person. After that, she cursed the second senior sister for being sold without realizing it, calling her a stupid and evil fool. As for the third senior sister, she called her a Buddha on the outside, but sinister inside, claiming she was a hypocrite. The fourth senior sister wasn't spared either. She was called arrogant and conceited, thinking she was invincible, but actually a complete waste of a woman. As for the fifth senior sister, Qin Muren, He Mengyan didn't curse her. She just said that if the ancient sages knew Qin Muren had read their books, they would be so ashamed they'd kill themselves on the spot. Qin Muren was utterly devastated at that moment. But the most pitiful were the youngest senior sister Lu Jingyao and the youngest junior brother Zhang Zun. At that time, the two even tried to persuade He Mengyan. But He Mengyan, seeing the two, without saying a word, she directly summoned a nascent soul puppet and chased the two of them to kill, nearly reducing Lu Jingyao and Zhang Zun to ashes. As for herself, she didn't curse herself. She just ran to the entrance of Juofeng Mountain and attempted suicide. If it weren't for Guan Zulin's timely intervention, there wouldn't be any in the 10,000 Puppets Valley of Qingshuan Holy Land today. This incident caused a huge commotion in the entire Qingshuan Holy Land. Guan Zulin finally issued a gag order, prohibiting all disciples from mentioning the incident, which barely contained the impact, but not talking about it didn't happen. Later, Guan Zulin and the third senior sister Su Wanqing investigated He Mengyan, ultimately discovering that half of He Mengyan's soul had suffered immense trauma, and whenever this half of the soul took control, she would become insane, even with tendencies for self-destruction. A soul is not merely a consciousness. Such damage is irreversible. In the end, Guan Zulin used her Mahayana power to forcibly split He Mengyan's soul in two. The crazed part needed to be suppressed with a soul-calming talisman day and night to keep He Mengyan normal. Disciple knows her mistake. Seeing Guan Zulin nod, He Mengyan was startled, immediately kneeling on the ground, her face full of timidity. Disciple didn't offend master, did I? What do you think? Guan Zulin asked. This ... He Mengyan swallowed hard, feeling increasingly guilty. Disciple wanted to advance in the art of puppetry today, but with the soul's deficiency, it was difficult to proceed. So I risked tearing off the soul-calming talisman. Disciple is guilty. Please punish me, master. Looking at her extremely timid sixth disciple, though Guan Zulin was angry, she could only sigh helplessly in the end. Forget it. I can't heal your injuries. Blaming you is useless. Just remember, no matter when or where, never rashly remove the soul-calming talisman. It will lead you to destruction. Yes, master. Guan Zulin thought for a moment and said, by the way, I remember, you forged a few tracking puppets recently, right? Yes, master. He Mengyan was puzzled. Who does master want to find? Gu Zhu. He Mengyan was shocked. Never expected master would want to find Gu Zhu. After all, recently, master didn't even allow anyone to mention his name. It seemed it was becoming a sect taboo. But Guan Zulin said coldly, your eldest senior sister has not returned for a long time. She must have gone to look for Gu Zhu. I think we should find Gu Zhu and bring him back to the sect. By then, your eldest senior sister will surely return as well. This ... Is there a problem? Master said, not to look for Gu Zhu anymore. He has already signed the abandonment letter. He is now an abandoned member of the sect. What will we do with him once he is brought back to the sect? Do you really need to ask? Guan Zulin frowned. All I want is for your eldest senior sister to return. As for Gu Zhu, once your eldest senior sister returns, we can kick him out of the sect again. This ... He Mengyan pursed her lips, finally nodded without saying anything. Guan Zulin didn't stay long. She just emphasized once more not to remove the soul-calming talisman, then quickly left. Seeing her master leave, the anxious He Mengyan finally breathed a sigh of relief. But then she felt some pain in her arm. Lifting her sleeve, she saw that on her jade-like arm, someone had carved 3 large characters with a knife. White-eyed Wolf. Gu Zhu was currently sitting by a window in a city tavern, tasting the delicacies of the tavern, listening to the conversations around him. Did you hear? Yesterday's 10,000 rhymes pilgrimage. Of course I heard. It said the talisman masters went crazy. Many knelt on the ground and wept bitterly, shouting that the supreme talisman Tao has descended, and that the talisman path will return to the peak of the 6 paths. What do you think the 10,000 rhymes pilgrimage is all about? Could it really be that the supreme talisman Tao has descended? Who can say for sure? But I heard. Someone saw? During the 10,000 rhymes pilgrimage, the direction the heaven and earth Tao rhymes were pointing was all towards our Yangshao city. What? Could the supreme talisman Tao have descended in our Yangshao city? Not clear. Only those in the talisman path can see the heaven and earth Tao rhymes, and very few can see them clearly. Who knows if it's true or false? But in the coming period, Yangshao city should be quite lively. Hearing these conversations, Guzu couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Yesterday, when he discovered he could invoke the 10,000 rhymes pilgrimage, he already thought that this pilgrimage would definitely become a major event. Now it seems, as expected, at least in Yangshao city where Guzu was, everyone was discussing it today. Some stories were true, some were false, all elaborately detailed. This Tao friend, you mentioned you have a large number of talismans to sell? At this moment, a corpulent manager dressed in brocade clothes from Wandao building approached Guzu. Guzu had already dealt with him yesterday. He was the manager responsible for miscellaneous affairs at Wandao building, named Cheng Fushu. Guzu had bought materials from Wandao building through him yesterday. However, at this moment, Cheng Fushu couldn't associate the plain-looking person in front of him with Feng Bugui, who was specially cared for by Surume, because Guzu used the three bodies mask. His appearance had completely changed. After Guzu confirmed, Cheng Fushu asked expectantly, I wonder how many talismans you mean by a large number? 7,000. How many? Cheng Fushu had just sat down and immediately stood up with a swish, looking at Guzu in shock. Guzu repeated, 7,000 talismans. Is there really that many? Seeing Cheng Fushu's reaction, Guzu wasn't surprised. He simply took out several hundred talismans from his storage ring and placed them on the table. Only took out this many because the table couldn't hold more. Seeing this scene, Cheng Fushu instinctively swallowed hard. 7,000 talismans, really speaking, isn't a lot. Just the daily sales volume of talismans at Wenbao building in Yangshao city can reach thousands. 7,000 talismans sometimes sell out in just a day or two. But the problem is, selling talismans is one thing, but having talismans to sell is another thing entirely. After all, making talismans is difficult. Even first-grade talismans take a lot of time. Wenbao building maintains a team of talisman masters, but they still can't meet the demand, struggling to support sales. So Wenbao building has to keep purchasing talismans externally. But those who come to sell talismans are mostly individual small wandering cultivators, selling a few or a dozen talismans. Those with a bit of resourcefulness can manage to bring in 100 or so. The main source of supply actually comes from collaborations with some sects and even holy lands. Wenbao building has its own supply channels, but unfortunately, the largest supplier, Kingshuan Holy Land, seems to have had some issues recently. Their talisman supply has dwindled, affecting Wenbao building's talisman stock as well. Recently, due to the shortage of talismans, the number of customers visiting Wenbao building has dropped. So, Manager Cheng, can Wenbao building handle it? Guzu asked at this moment. Of course we can. Cheng Fushu nodded repeatedly. Don't mention 7,000 talismans. If you have the ability, even 70,000 is no problem. Guzu nodded. In that case, Elder Cheng, name your price. Cheng Fushu glanced at Guzu, tentatively said, according to Wenbao building's standard pricing, 6 spirit stones per talisman. For ordinary first-grade talismans, the selling price is generally 8 to 10 spirit stones. The unified purchase price has always been 6 lower-grade spirit stones. But Guzu directly shook his head. No, 7 stones. Cheng Fushu gritted his teeth. Guzu spoke up. I want 10 stones. That's impossible. Cheng Fushu shook his head without hesitation. Wenbao building sells first-grade talismans for only 10 lower-grade spirit stones. Some even sell for just 8. at a price of 10 stones. We wouldn't make any profit. First-grade talismans can vary, but they're still first-grade talismans. Guzu shook his head. Our talismans are not ordinary talismans. He emphasized the word our, making Cheng Fushu even more certain of his suspicion. This person must have some powerful backing. But then, Cheng Fushu shook his head. A first-grade talisman is a first-grade talisman. Except for the extremely rare Dao talisman, there won't be much price difference. As he spoke, Cheng Fushu suddenly widened his eyes because he saw Guzu pick up a talisman and casually flip it in his hand. Cheng Fushu recognized that talisman. It was just a first-grade spirit-gathering talisman, but its talisman patterns were exceptionally exquisite. And there was even a faint special fluctuation. This is a Dao talisman. Cheng Fushu was astonished, but then he shook his head again. Dao talismans indeed have a higher value, but they are very rare. You can't rely on them. You don't have all Dao talismans. Again, he was interrupted mid-sentence because he saw Guzu flipping through those hundreds of talismans one by one. And as he flipped through the talismans, each talisman had that special fluctuation. All of them are Dao talismans. Cheng Fushu was completely stunned, even looking at the person in front of him with a bit of fear. How is this possible? Dao talismans are extremely rare. Talisman masters can occasionally create Dao talismans, but the probability is very low. But the person in front of him produced so many talismans, and all of them were Dao talismans. How could this be possible? These are not ordinary Dao talismans, but perfect Dao talismans. 10 lower-grade spirit stones. Wenbao building won't lose money, Gu Zhu said. Hearing this, Cheng Fushu had no room for hesitation. He immediately nodded. Friend, we at Wenbao building will take all your talismans. However many you have, we want them all. As he said this, Cheng Fushu's voice trembled with excitement. Wenbao building had been short on talismans lately. These 7,000 talismans could alleviate the urgent need, not to mention 7,000 Dao talismans. The rest of the transaction was straightforward. Cheng Fushu inspected each talisman. He wanted to inquire about Gushu's background, but Guzu deflected his questions. Cheng Fushu, being perceptive, noticed Gushu's reluctance and wisely refrained from further questioning. Once the transaction was complete, Cheng Fushu told Guzu, if Guzu can get more talismans, he can always come to me. Wendao building will take them all. Guzu didn't give a definite answer to this. He just told Cheng Fushu to prepare more talisman materials and carry them with him. If they meet again, he would contact him. Then he left the tavern first. As soon as he stepped out, Guzu noticed the people following him from a distance. Obviously, they were from Wenbao building, trying to investigate his background. In the past, Guzu might have found this troublesome, but with the three bodies mask now, with just a blink, Guzu had already changed his appearance and walked past the two trackers. In his heart, he couldn't help but marvel at the power of the three bodies mask. Once he reached a secluded place, Guzu restored his original appearance, then slowly walked towards Wenbao building. Having earned a good amount of spirit stones, he naturally needed to prepare some cultivation resources for himself. Besides, Guzu also planned to gather some information at Wenbao building. As expected, upon arriving at Wenbao building, Guzu noticed that Cheng Fushu was already reporting to Surime. His special status kept anyone from stopping him. He moved closer to listen. I tried probing him multiple times, but he was tight-lipped. The only thing we know is that person should be part of a group with a considerable number of people. Otherwise, they couldn't have produced so many talismans. Although it's unclear if the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage is related to that group. It likely is. At least they must know some secrets we aren't aware of. Watching Chang Fushu's confident analysis, Guzhu agreed very much. After greeting Surumei, he prepared to leave. He didn't continue eavesdropping, but Surumei suddenly asked, "Friend Feng, how are the talismans you made yesterday? My talent in talismans is limited. I need to take it slow." Guzhu shook his head with some regret. Surumei looked a bit doubtful. But in the end, she didn't suspect anything. She just comforted Guzhu, saying each skill has its expert, telling him to come to Wenbao building if he needed anything. She even said, if Guzhu was interested in talismans, he could come to Wenbao building, and she would arrange for someone to teach him. To this, Guzhu just nodded and thanked her. Then he went straight back to his residence, Tingyuju, to cultivate in peace. For the next 2 days, Guzhu focused on his cultivation. He did inquire about the news, because the rumor that the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage was directed at Yangshao City had attracted some attention, although only a few people were saying this. For most sects and forces, they would rather believe it true than dismiss it as false. At the very least, they had to investigate. In just 2 days, a large number of unfamiliar faces began to flood into Yangshao City, and with the arrival of these people, the biggest change in Yangshao City was the deterioration of public order. Almost every day there were vendettas, incidents of fighting and brawling, and even murders in broad daylight. It was said that even the city lord of Yangshao City was alarmed, personally taking action once to deter a group of malicious outsiders. While Guzhu was observing the situation and focusing on his cultivation, Wenbao building was getting worried, especially Chang Fushu. Every few days, he would visit that tavern, hoping the mysterious group's people would come again and bring another batch of Dao talismans. There was no other way. The effect of Guzhu's batch of Dao talismans was simply too strong. At first, when they started selling them, some wandering cultivators thought they were too expensive. But once the first person tried one of Guzhu's Dao talismans, they were amazed. Soon, a crowd rushed to buy them, causing quite a stir that day. Moreover, in just 2 hours, Guzhu's 7,000 talismans were completely sold out. This excited Chang Fushu greatly, hoping every day to see that person again, to order more talismans. But unfortunately, for 5 days in a row, he found nothing. That day, he returned to Wenbao building dejected, only to see Surumei still didn't find the person. Reporting to manager Su, "No! What's going on? Did that group leave?" This subordinate doesn't know either. Chang Fushu sighed, but I think, with so many people coming to Yangshao City to gather information, they don't want to be discovered. Surumei frowned, understanding the reasoning. Based on Wenbao building's analysis during this period, she was almost certain that those people in the dark were definitely related to the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage. Now with such a big commotion, it was normal for them not to want to show themselves. But a message came from the main building. Qingchuan Holy Land has recently increased the speed of talisman production, but in the short term, it's only for their own use. Several other merchants also heard the news and are now intervening in our cooperation with several other sects. Our situation is very bad now. If we still can't meet the demand for talismans, then next, Wenbao building might not only lose the talisman business, but it might also affect the entire Wenbao building. This is bad news. No one expected that Qingchuan Holy Land, once very strong in talismans, this time ended up being so unreliable. Wenbao building, their partner, suffered because of it. Surumei's face turned pale. After a moment of contemplation, she said, "We can wait for those in the dark, but we can't afford to wait. If they don't want to show themselves, then we have no choice. We must burn our boats." Burn our boats? Everyone in Wenbao building was puzzled. But then Surumei said, "Arrange for someone to send out a message." What message? Everyone was curious. Just say that Wenbao building has mastered a secret method to enhance first-grade Dao talismans, and that our Dao grade talismans will increase significantly. What? Hearing this, everyone was dumbfounded. Wanbao Building is a commercial power. Now with so many powerful figures in Yangshao City, releasing this information, wouldn't it deliberately attract attention? Invite suspicion? What was Surume planning? This manager Su was indeed smart. This was a show of determination to tell me in this way that Wanbao Building will keep its mouth shut, won't betray its allies. Indeed, when Guzu heard this news, he immediately understood Surume's intention. He had to admit, Surume was indeed bold, at least for now. Wanbao Building was trustworthy. Since the other party was so determined, Guzu decided not to hesitate. Early the next morning, he went out, found Cheng Fushu, who was still wandering around the tavern. But this time, Guzu had changed his face again. Wanbao Building increased the price per talisman for Guzu by 3 spirit stones. From the previous 10 per talisman to 13 spirit stones per talisman, Guzu did not refuse. After all, his Danshan and Chessie were so vast. It was like a gold-devouring beast. Naturally, he wouldn't dislike having more spirit stones. But this time, Guzu still didn't say much to Cheng Fushu. He just handed over the prepared 800 talismans to him, then took the massive amount of talisman materials Cheng Fushu had been carrying. Cheng Fushu repeatedly invited Guzu to Wanbao Building for a detailed discussion, but Guzu refused. Trust is built step by step. He used the 3 bodies mask to contact Wanbao Building to see Wanbao Building stands on the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage. He used the 3 bodies mask to contact Wanbao Building to see Wanbao Building stands on the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage. At least for now. He still planned to observe further, but it seemed Wanbao Building was quite sincere. Not only did they increase the purchase price of the talismans, but this time, when Guzu left the tavern, he wasn't followed. However, as Guzu walked back, thinking about how to avoid triggering the 10,000 Rhymes pilgrimage while making talismans, and how to fully open up his talisman market, a familiar voice suddenly called out from behind. Junior brother. This voice was extremely familiar, making Guzu instinctively frown. He turned around and saw 2 familiar figures standing not far behind him.